everything that I do is going to be a lot harder than I expect, but not harder than what I can figure out.
Welcome back to Case Studies. We've been talking about doing this interview for a long time. I'm with my friend Asim Hafeez. And we met through like this interesting window in your life.
Yeah.
And ultimately it ended up being kind of this really beautiful connection where we worked together for a couple of years, but we probably worked apart a lot longer than we ever worked together.
Yeah.
But you made such an impact on me that it was always just something that I was always cheering for your successes. And now obviously you built beautiful company, been super successful, which was not surprised. But I think it was going back and catching up and talking about some principles of entrepreneurship, some principles of hustle, some principles of resilience. And even just kind of going back to your family's background, because I know like those roots come from your dad and your mom and kind of those principles of frugality and ingenuity and just scrappiness. And so anyway, excited to catch up.
Excited to be here. You're awesome. And, you had a big impact on my life as well. So obviously we drifted apart with where the workspace went, and it's been really neat to see all the amazing things you've done. I've just always followed because I'm like, hey, big impact. I just feel like the right people, no matter which space you put them in, it's just a matter of time, right? So it's been awesome to see what's going on with.
Yeah. So take me back to the beginning. Like where you grew up
in Pakistan.
In Pakistan until when?
So I was born in Pakistan, moved to the States when I was 10.
Okay.
You'll enjoy the story. To Brooklyn, New York. First day of school. Didn't really know how to speak English. Like I'd watched cartoons, right? Watched some Pink Panther back in the day. But I have to pee really bad. And I don't know how to ask to go to the bathroom. And all I know is I see someone else, like see a girl raise her hand and see blah, 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 whatever she says, because I can't understand it. I just understand the word bathroom. And the teacher probably tells her to go. And I'm sitting there saying, A, I don't know how to ask to go to the bathroom. B, I don't know how to get there and I don't know how to ask directions, right? No. So all I do is I shoot up my hand and I say bathroom. I have no idea if the teacher said it was okay for me to go or not, but I was like off to the races because I was like, I got to follow that person. So I go in, I end up in the bathroom, I'm peeing, and then it's a girl's bathroom. Right. And they're like, and I'm like, finish peeing and I leave. But like perfect example of, I didn't know what I was doing.
At 10 years old.
10 years old.
That's super traumatic. Like, was it like, what was kind of the emotional process of going from Pakistan to Brooklyn, New York?
I think I cried myself to sleep every night for the first 90 to 120 nights. And I think part of it was, just Pakistan's also very different, like culturally. So you have extended family. The easiest example I could give you, it'd be the equivalent of having a Thanksgiving dinner, like that many people around you, aunts, uncles, cousins, all that stuff for dinner every single night. And it's not like a big meal and turkeys and all that stuff, but just the concept of there's so many relationships, right? What exaggerated it probably is I was the only grandchild on either side of the family with between mom and dad, 15, 16 aunts and uncles. So you can just imagine the love and all that stuff as the only nephew for so long. So I think that part was really tough. Like the language barrier, yes. And, and obviously anyone that doesn't know, they'll get picked on in school a little bit. And that is what it is. But losing all that emotional stability in all these relationships was probably the hardest part.
Yeah. Like I think about my 10-year-old right now.
Right.
And just where she's at in life. And she's got a pretty safe environment, great school. She's been in for a long time, tons of activities, friend group, and she's going through it. You know what I mean? So the idea of new language, new city, New York.
Yeah, Brooklyn, out of all the places.
Yeah, Brooklyn. And to kind of plug into that, it just had to have been so overwhelming.
It was overwhelming, yes, but the unique thing throughout my entire life that I think has served me really well is knowing that my dad went through something way worse. Like, meaning I had my father, my mother with me. So it was at least like, okay, like mom and dad are here, right?
Got a structure.
Yeah. And I think what I drew indirectly inspiration from, or my scenario didn't seem as bad even to me, was like, man, dad had to leave everyone and everything he knew behind, including wife and kid, to go to a different country, not know the language, with the sole purpose of making money to send back home.
So your dad was in Brooklyn for a long time before you guys got there.
Yeah. So I would see my dad for give or take, 1 to 2 months a year. He'd come home. He was a cab driver. And he was awesome with us, but he had 9 other siblings. And he left originally to be like, I need to help provide for my siblings.
How did he get into the US? Was it a work visa?
I don't even know all the details, but the fact that he got in and he was like, his thing was just like, I'm going to figure out however I can to figure out the language. I mean, Casey, think about what people get nervous about nowadays, right? Like, oh, I'm going to college in the other side of the country. Oh, I'm doing this. It's like, hey, all your relationships left behind. And then you go to a completely different country. You don't even know the language. And you're like, I don't even know what employment looks like there, but
Yeah.
that concept of I'll figure it out. If other people can do it, I can too. So I think in that regard, it was easier because I at least had my mom and dad.
And how many siblings?
2,
Okay.
way younger. My sister's 10 and a half years younger than me. So I was the only child for a while. And then my brother's another 7 years younger. So
Okay.
not like that buddy, quite that we're going in it together.
So you were kind of the oldest sibling, kind of by yourself for a while.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And talk to me about Pakistan. Like, what is it like growing up in Pakistan? Because it's a big country, right?
Huge, relatively huge. Maybe like 200 million people there now.
So big. I mean,
big population.
Little over half the U.S. Like you think about
a lot of people.
Big population.
Yeah, I can only go off of what I remember, right? And I think everyone has maybe a romanticized version of wherever they grew up to their 10, when they're 10, because life is different.
Simple.
You're sheltered from some of that. But, I just remember how many relationships I had there. I just remember so many good times. Even to this day, when we have gone back and, we just went back with my wife and my kid because they never met Nicole. And the biggest thing I remember coming out of it when Nicole came out with is like, even though people have less materialistically, the level of connection is so much deeper. I don't know if it's because people are going through more tough times together, or they're like, hey, this is our anchor.
Yeah.
Is people and relationships.
They just care about each other.
Yeah, it's such a high level. Such a high level.
Yeah. So you move over here. Talk to me about your dad, because your dad's like true entrepreneur, like absolute scrapper, absolute hustler.
Totally.
Like truly like the definition of like the American dream.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, cab driver. And I remember, this has stuck with me for so long. Like, he worked so hard, but sometimes if I was running late to school and he had to drop me off, I remember there was times where my dad would drop me off like a block or 2 away, because he didn't want people to just look at me and say, oh, your dad's just a cab driver, right? And I'm like, especially hindsight now, I'm like, dude, are you crazy? Like, so much respect for you. Like, why would you even make that up in your head? But like, as a father, how much you would care about your kid to be like, hey, I'm going to do everything I can.
It almost makes you tear up now, because
absolutely, dude.
You think about like
what was going, like, especially after you have a kid, you're like, I'm willing to do anything and everything for my kid. And oh, by the way, I don't want to do anything to make his life more difficult.
Because you're in that world right now.
Yeah.
Like you're 100% in that world of,
Yeah, I just remember those couple of times where you dropped me off like a block away, and I didn't really find out until later. I mean, it was like, there's stories that have come out now over the years, and they break me down every time. Like, I remember for my first birthday when we were in Brooklyn, and I was like, hey, you can have any shirt you want at the store. I forgot where we were, somewhere in Brooklyn. And I was like, oh, like, I really like this one. And my dad was like, well, this one's really nice. And I'm like, yeah, but I really like, I'm a kid. I'm like, I really like this one. Right. And he's like, well, this one's really nice. I was like, yeah, no, but like in my head, I'm like, you told me to pick. I like this one, you know? I didn't find out till way later. And this breaks me so hard. Or my mom was like, hey, remember that day where you picking out the shirt? And I was like, yup. It was like, dad was really like drained financially from everything he was doing. The shirt you picked out was $12 or something. I don't remember, like $18 maybe. And he had 12 in his wallet at that time. Man. And that's why he was nuts in that one. And they're like, oh, I feel like a jerk, right? But like,
you don't know.
Yeah.
So grew up in Brooklyn.
Yep.
Got through school.
Yep.
And then where was it from Brooklyn?
So you're going to love all these stories. The only reason we moved out of Brooklyn is when my family was visiting Pakistan. My dad was visiting extended family that's more in the remote, super remote areas. He got sick. He went to just like a local doctor. And to save a couple of bucks, this doctor, not without my dad knowing, obviously, used a used needle on him. Just like boiled it or something in the back. So my father ended up getting Hep A, B, and C at the same time. And, I remember those calls. Like I remember when he first found out, I remember the doctor calling and being like, hey, you tested positive for Hep A. And that was genuinely like, tries not to show kids and all that stuff, that like emotion. He's like, oh, like, it's okay. It's just A, we'll be okay.
Yeah.
But as long as it's not A and B, we'll be fine. 5 minutes later, phone rings. Hey, you tested positive for B as well. You have Hep A and B. And you could tell he's getting concerned. And he's like, yes, but he said it's okay as long as I don't get A, B, and C. 5 minutes later.
Wow.
Phone rings. So you have Hep A, B, and C. We think you have less than 4 months to live. And you have like a 98% chance of not being here in 6 months or whatever. And tears down, my dad's face, obviously, my mom, me. I remember that day so clearly because that's the first time in my life I clearly remember cursing out God. Like I'm just, like whatever, 11, 12 years old, go into the bathroom, where you can cry and not be judged, for lack of a better word, right? And I just literally remember probably every curse word I knew at the time, throwing it at the Almighty and being like, this isn't fair and all that stuff. So we ended up moving to Connecticut partially because we're like anything and everything, and hepatitis has a way easier process now where you just pop a pill and you're fine. Back in the old days, it was kind of like taking chemo because I remember the shots and the 104 fevers and, just skin's yellow and puking and all that stuff. But one of the reasons we moved to Connecticut was they're also like, hey, you may want to get away from the city and go somewhere where it's a little more woodsy and natural. And the story ended up working out really well. Dad made it, which is amazing. But that was a really impactful time in my life. And you're like, I just remember, having conversations of like, hey, I may not be here in 6 months, a year.
Yeah.
You have your mom who doesn't speak English, has been a stay-at-home mom, and my mom's amazing. She's been like my emotional, like absolutely stability for my entire life. Like we just grew up with such an awesome mom where I'm like, man, without her. My mom and my dad have had such a unique role where it's like without my dad being tough, I don't know if I'm where I am, but without me knowing that my mom's got my back no matter how bad I fail, I don't know. Because with my dad, my relationship's like, I knew he'd be proud of me, but there's also a level of like, well, he might be disappointed if I don't achieve blank, right? But like also knowing that my mom like
just loved you unconditionally.
Just loved me. Like I'd come home and just so much love and just didn't matter what happened, right?
Yeah.
So I think that combo for me worked out really well. But either way, dad made it. So that was awesome. I joke with my friends still sometimes, they'll say things like, dude, throw up a prayer. And I'm like, bro, I don't waste my prayers. Like my biggest one got answered, so I don't take that lightly. Like whatever happens, happens. Like I'm not praying for the Uber to get here in 5 minutes. Like I'm not wasting on these silly little things,
Yeah. So moved to Connecticut.
Yep.
Where did your entrepreneurial journey start?
I was, they're just crazy stories of all these big moments in my life. So I lost my senior, I did Connecticut, finished up middle school there, did high school there, did some sports like football, track, etc. out of my senior year was the first summer that I didn't really have anything going on. No summer camps, no anything. Lost my grandma that I was very, very close to in Pakistan. And I think I was just in this depressed state, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
Dad never let me have a job up until that point because he just, every time I looked for work, he was like, I don't want you working somewhere, you're just going to get paid something hourly. And his thing was always, and maybe it's just a Pakistani dad thing, is how many hours did you work? Well, I think I'd work this many hours. Like, great. Those hours, if I have to pay you, I'll pay you, but I want you studying for those hours.
Wow.
Right? He's like, if you need the money, I will pay you that same amount.
You always just had that mentality, huh?
Yeah. So he's like, you have to study, et cetera, et cetera. Because, he grew up with the mentality of you're either going to get paid for your back because he'd worked so hard his entire life, or you're going to get paid for your mind. So
yeah.
And his world was go to school, go to
get
college.
As much education as you can.
But like this $10 an hour job, like that you're just checking people.
Don't waste your time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I never had a job. I was semi-depressed probably at that time. My nurse, who my wife thinks had a crush on me or something, was like, hey, like you got to start working. And I was like, no, like I don't really know. And I was like, no, not doing it. She went out of her way for my next like checkup or whatever. She literally got newspapers and circled jobs for me on there. And then I was like, man, now I'm just going to feel like a turd if I don't at least call them.
Do something. Yeah.
Yeah. So I called a couple of places. One of them was Cutco. It was like 18 per appointment. And I just read it as 18 per hour. And I'm like, 18 or 11? I like 18 better, Went in, your mind reads what it wants to read, maybe, and I saw like sporting goods and like, Casey, I didn't even know there were hunting knives and all that stuff, right? And I just saw cutlery and sporting goods. In my mind, I'm like, man, this is going to be like Dick's Sporting Goods. I'll throw the football around with some of my buddies, sporting goods, I'm good, And I go in, and it's like, they're talking about like knives and all this stuff. And at the end of my interview, I'm like, hey, like, when do we talk about the sporting goods, And they're like, well, no, like that's like these knives and stuff. I'm like, oh, okay. But I clearly remember when I walked in for the interview, I remember how warm everyone was and how welcoming they were, right? Like everyone was like, hey, how you doing? Just that feeling you get.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking like, I don't know if I'm going to do this long term. I don't know if I'm going to do it short term. But I like how I feel when I hang out with these people. So I was like, fine, I'll go in for a training. And then I was like, it was never about the money.
Yeah.
Because my dad it wasn't like, hey, you have to make X amount. I think I just kept showing up to meetings because they felt good. And I was just at a time in my life where I needed a community. And then did Cutco. And Cutco has a really good culture of like, like that's when I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad for the first time. And so then I was introduced to a law of attraction and all these things that I had never heard before. And I was like,
because they were big into personal development, right? Like
massive.
That was the kicker. That was the pay.
Absolutely.
Outside of the commission pay was you grew personally. And I think that was where we met you and your team. You were one of the senior leaders of this group that came over. I think it was Vector Marketing, wasn't it?
Vector Marketing.
And they just had a culture of incredible people.
Amazing.
The people that had got through that gauntlet.
Right.
They were exceptional. They spent so much time developing themselves and their social skills and their sales skills and their leadership skills and their management skills. And it was something that like immediately we're like, these guys are advanced. Like they're not average. They're not above it. Like they're especially on the leadership side, they just had exceptional leaders. And you still see a lot of those guys, kind of sprinkled all throughout
every industry.
Well,
there's two things. They recruit a lot of people, so it's a numbers game. They recruit 150,000 people or whatever it is. You're going to have some gems.
Yeah.
And then you take that many people, you give them an easy sale, right? Like, hey, if I pitched you and it's like, you don't like the SAT, you can get a $50 knife, right? And you're like, oh, cool, I got my first sale.
Something you can say yes to. Yep.
Yeah. And then it starts building your confidence. And then they're just immense culture of developing leaders and also an immense culture of pushing people out of their nest egg, right? Like I sold, but then they're like the next year, like, hey, do you want to manage? And I'm like, manage? But I'm like, okay, cool. Like I'll manage. But it was like such an entrepreneurial concept.
Yeah, and like there was some stories that were kind of legendary stories. Like you literally have to go like knock doors and get somebody to donate your space or something like that. Like
Absolutely.
like
My first office space was an old Curve studio, and we have scripts for it. Like, here's how you get people to give you, because who in their right mind is going to give a 3-month lease to anyone, let alone an 18-year-old kid, where they're probably like, where's your father or something, right? So we literally have scripts of like, here's how and the pitch, we had the pitch down, right? It's like, hey, and the number was 100. And I always told people, you knock 100 office space leases, somebody will listen to you. And you look for the spaces that are like not advertised.
But I remember hearing that and just being like, that is so insane. It's kind of like if you can't solve this problem, you're not fit to manage. And they kind of send you out, like you have to go like basically get almost free space or like very cheap space.
I got my 3-month space for $1,500, but it was my money. The lease was under my name, and I think that's what made it so interesting. Like
skin in the game.
The money I saved from sales, all that went into my office space. The receptionist was on my payroll, right? Like, and it's tough. Like if you don't get going right off the rip. I remember at the end of month 1, Casey, I wrote a check to my receptionist for like $250 or something. And right when I handed that check over, I was like, man, she officially has more money than I do. So like clock's running, like your burn rate.
Yeah.
That was, and a lot of tears in that office, because you're sitting there being like, man, what did I do? What am I doing? Saved money last year, just spending it this year, and so on and so forth. But
wow, it's incredible.
Yeah.
No, it's so cool.
Yeah.
So go out, sales rep, manager, regional manager.
Yeah.
Along the way, investing was always something that like was just intuitively like, I don't know if you studied it. I don't know if it was your dad culture, but like investing's just always been a part of you ever since that I met you. And I think this is a passion project for me, specifically around young people.
Right.
And I think it was because my life got changed by having a mentor that taught me to invest young.
Right.
Like where did you learn it? And then 2, how did you apply
it? Poor Dad, Secrets of a Millionaire Mind, right? Like all those books. And then it was funny enough with my manager, we would play the Rat Race game by Robert Kiyosaki. And I was like, and I don't know if you ever played it. It's awesome. But we played the Rat Race game where you've got your income, you got your expenses. The money in the middle is your, what you use to buy passive income. And once it gets above your expenses, you're out of the rat race and it becomes fun. It was just gamification, right?
Yeah.
Played football, played Madden, right? Like loved Madden back in the day. And it was like, to me, it was just this whole big game, Rise of Empires, whatever you played.
Yeah.
So I just turned it into that. And I think that knowledge combined with being in commission, where I was like, man, I can
you
really
can affect this.
Like I can turn up this dial. And I think that's one of the reasons I stayed in commission sales. I was like, even if I make less money than W-2, just the thought that I could double from one year to the next
was inspiring to you.
Was inspired.
Yeah.
And then you combine that with the experience that I had with, my dad. There was definitely a level of paranoia. I don't think I quite pinpointed it until last 6 months when I was on another podcast for investing. And I was like, you know what? I think I've been chasing passive income so hard my entire life because of the experience I saw.
Yeah.
Right? Because like the reality is something could happen to us at any moment. And you've got kids, or I've got, parents, and I have all these aspirations to make sure I'm able to take care of them. Like, what if something did happen to me?
Yep.
So the only income my entire working life, I've counted as my income is the passive income. So like the active income was like, does not exist, right? Because like, yes, make a lot, but all this is just to buy passive income.
Yep.
Because if I stopped work tomorrow, would it still be there? The answer is no. If I died tomorrow, would my kid be able to benefit from? The answer is no. So that's where my mentality was always like, the only thing I truly count as
you hunt it. Like you're
dude,
like you literally hunt.
That's the only thing. And
yield.
Right. Hunt yield. Oh, you know me, right? I hunt yield like crazy. And I think the other thing also is, Casey, with that, when you have that level of clarity on it, it's so easy to keep your expenses low.
Yeah, just because you stay within that number, lower than that number, and
the lower this number is, the higher this number is, the bigger the middle number is, to then buy this number, and this is the only number that really matters.
Yep.
So that's been that's been my thing, and I remember even just starting small. I'm like, man, if I could just get, I remember my first passive income and I was like, man, I got my $10 a month Netflix cover for the rest of my life. Never need to budget for
Oh,
Netflix
that's
ever
really
again,
Tony Robbins, he talks about this quote. He says, income is the outcome.
Hmm.
And I think people miss a lot of stuff with investing where ultimately what you're looking for is like freedom.
Right.
And if you can get that number big enough, it creates kind of sustainable long-term freedom. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And like for me, it was peace of mind. I started investing not for net worth, and everyone's got their own, philosophy, and I'm not here to knock theirs. Mine was just like, I want my dollars to buy me peace of mind.
Yeah.
And for me, that was passive income, yield, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think part of what got me so excited about investing too is one of the most frustrating parts about sales for me was you end the year and then the scoreboard goes down to 0 again.
Yeah.
Like, oh, dude.
You wanted it to like start. You wanted to know, hey, this is, it's not that much different than a lot of the businesses that we love. Like we look for companies with recurring income, SaaS businesses, subscription businesses, stuff that has recurring income because it's stickier and it's more stable. Like when you're going through, we're in this Gab Wireless is one of these businesses that they're going to have 150 million of subscription revenue.
Right. You're like, we can weather a lot.
You look at that number and you're just like, man, that's a nice starting point going into or Pura is another one of these.
Yeah.
200 plus million of subscription revenue that you're like, that's a really nice foundation. Vivint, the reason that it's such a resilient company
it's because
is you got like this highly diversified, sticky recurring revenue that kind of masks a lot of sins in the business. If you go make a mistake, well, you got
it's
more
not
recurring.
Like famine,
yeah, yep.
Yeah, and I think I in sales, we always say yesterday's home runs don't win today's ball games. That's true, but I was like, it'd be nice if they did.
Yeah,
it'd be nice if yesterday's home runs won today's ball games because the reality is, anyone that thinks they're going to be smacking home runs for the rest of their life, at some point, like everyone's got a shelf life. I don't know what everyone's is. Maybe in sales, the average person 6 years. I have no idea.
Yep.
For some people, it's 15, and I was like, well, planning for that income to always be there is probably a pretty bad plan.
Yeah.
So,
talk to me about the transition to Vivint.
Yeah.
Because I think there was so much good that came from it, but it was pretty disruptive also.
Yeah. Well, coming from Cutco, and in Cutco, they didn't do door-to-door, right? So we always heard like door-to-door, no telemarketing. That's part of our recruiting pitch, right? And because I was always recruiting that, I was like, oh, this, like door-to-door is the devil or something, right?
Yeah.
For lack of a better word. So, and had a really cool title. Things were good, low 20s, making 300, 350, 370. Like my high school self would have been really proud of that alone.
Yeah.
So let's just say that,
Yep.
Came over to Vivint. One of the reasons I remember coming over to Vivint was I remember sitting down with you. I remember sitting down with Jeff. I remember meeting Todd at his house. And I just remember thinking, these guys are playing at such a different level than what I'm surrounded by. And that's no shot at the Cutco guys. Like, I love them. I wouldn't be where I am without them. But I also wouldn't be where I am if I hadn't transitioned out at some point.
Yeah.
So I remember thinking so clearly, I was like, man, even if I make less money here, I think I'll be worth more in the long run. So I was like, even if my paycheck went down to half, I think just because the caliber of people influencing me, my lifetime value on these relationships
But
will be
you were how old?
24.
Because I'm like
23.
fascinated, like where that wisdom came from, like having this thought process of like, I'm willing to potentially even like make less to go have this experience.
Yeah.
Because I want to have proximity with certain people. You know what I mean? Like
Casey, you might think this is crazy, but I remember having the divisional title, or whatever you want to call it, at Cutco, and it was great, but I just couldn't crush it during the fall and the winter seasons, right? And I had a buddy who was crushing it, and I literally floated the idea to the CEO, and I was like, I think my lifetime income would be higher if I was an assistant manager for him for 1 year and gave up the income for this year and made 200K less, I feel like I'd make an extra 100 grand a year for the next few years. And it's just a matter of time before I recoup it, and my lifetime income would be higher. CEO wasn't thrilled about that. They didn't want to lose the top divisional, but like that thought.
That logic isn't normal.
Okay.
It's beautiful,
no
but it's not normal. You know what I mean? Like to say, hey, I'm willing to go invest in experiences.
And in learning.
Yeah, in learning and education experiences with an expectation that my future earnings are going to be significantly higher because of it. Like I love it, and I like personally live it. You know, I've invested a lot of money into education over the years, but I don't think it's normal. You know what I mean? I think people look, and especially somebody like yourself that does watch every penny.
Yeah.
Like you're really good understanding inflows and outflows and just really like having your arms around like the expenses of the business. But to couple that with like, I'm going to allocate capital, time, money, and energy to these experiences. I just like that. That's a trait of yours that I admire.
I think it's a two-pronged thing. I think one, it's looking at lifetime value. I think the other is it's also coming from maybe a slight paranoia. I just look at that account on the investment as an insurance account.
Interesting.
Like, even if you're making 150, 200, I mean, I'm not saying like, I get that there's bigger income years.
Yeah.
But like, you can make 150, 200 grand. Not a bad idea to put aside 10%.
Yeah.
As like, hey, what do I need to do as an insurance account to make sure I don't go downwards again?
Yeah.
So I look at it as an insurance account personally.
That's so great. So worked at Vivint for how many years?
Worked at Vivint for 3 to 4 years.
And did kind of everything. Went out and sold, did the same thing. You went and worked with Sam Taggart.
Yeah.
You know, one of the kind of best salesmen ever to work in the industry. Sam just wrote a new book. You know, he's kind of like really gone all in on saying, I'm going to be an expert in this space.
Yep.
And really had like, I talked to him probably 6 months ago, and he wasn't the same Sam as when he was a young guy. Like
when I met him.
He's professionalized for sure.
I love him. Like every time I talk to him, I'm like, dude, when I met you, and he was crushing it and making a lot of money. But I remember thinking like, he's good, very good at selling, kind of like a young punk, you know? Like,
way more raw.
Yeah, very raw.
Super talented.
Can recruit off of the fact that I can sell.
Yep.
But there's something still left there, you know? But like who he is now, completely different.
Yeah, he's a rock star.
That transition, that summer was probably the hardest summer of my life professionally. Because it's one thing when you struggle, when you haven't had success. It's quite another to get a gut check when you feel like, okay, like, you know, I'm a hot shot. Like I'm being, you know, floated as somebody who can be the top of the top at the Cutco Vector echelon, right? Yeah. So that summer we tried to do the same model and bring it over. And after 4 months, I was like, dude, I don't like this. Like, not that I don't like Vivint. Like, I don't like this feeling.
Yeah.
And what served me really well at Cutco when I did the same things, like in Cutco, my first summer that I was telling you what I struggled, I just started leaving voicemails. I would look at the sales report, started leaving voicemails for like the top 15 office managers in the nation out of like 500. And I just remember thinking, they're not all going to call me back, but 1 or 2 will. And just daily, just like, hey, you know, new guy, don't know exactly what I'm doing, but I'm hungry. Just any guidance would be super appreciated. And I started getting people calling me back. And I was, cool, what are you doing? And then they tell me what they're doing. I'm like, great, let me implement that. And that summer, I went from at the end of May, there was like 82 offices in my category in the summer program.
Yeah.
And I was, you know, number 1 on opposite day. So I was all the way at the bottom of the ranking at the end of that first month. And I ended up the summer number 2 in the region.
So you literally went from the worst to
one of the best. Yeah, one of the best. But I was just like, okay, what served me well? Great. This is the playbook that worked before. So guess what? I called you. I called Mendez. I called Bell. And I'm like, dude, I don't want to figure this out on my own. I'm really good at replicating stuff. Who's still out there? And it was like September. I was like, let me just learn. It started with just like doors. I think you guys were like, dude, just go to Insider, I think it was called. Go to Insider, watch some videos, and just go knock locally. And I'm like, all right.
You were trying to do a different model. You were trying to do the Cutco model.
Totally different model.
And it just didn't work with Vivint.
You know, part of the reason it didn't work, Casey, is because we hadn't sold.
Yeah.
Like the leaders that were teaching people to sell had not sold.
I think that was always so fascinating to me because like you underestimate how much institutional knowledge and culture is built into these like really great door-to-door companies. Like it is deep expertise on a subject. I think from the outside, it's like, oh, you just put a sales force together and get going. It's just not that way. Like it's special. Like these guys are world class. These guys are like the experts on their space. And it's these tiny nuanced things that make a significant difference. You know what I mean?
I've seen it even in our company. Like when I bring in people from outside, I just give them the benefit of the doubt. Like, well, of course they know how to, right?
Yep.
And after about 6 months, I'm always like, dang, I can see how promoting from within would have solved that issue.
Yep.
Or, going from the ground up. So yeah, that was a different model. It wasn't working. Part of it's like we didn't sell it. And then looking back at it, it's laughable what we're doing. I was like, that's so stupid. How did I think that was going to work? Like the pitch was so bad, right? And I remember just calling you guys up and I'm like, hey, uncle, like this, I'm not past door knocking. The only thing, like whatever it takes to be successful. And you guys said, are you willing to go knock? And I'm like, dude, I'm willing to whatever to not have this feeling.
And I think you're one of the few, that you're one of the few that was willing to go recreate yourself. And it kind of changed your career.
Changed my life.
You know what I mean? You stayed at Vivint for, a couple more years, but what you did was you repositioned yourself in a whole different career where, you look at what you've done since then, a completely different career path.
I think that, forget just the relationships, right, from Vivint, and just that alone paid dividends. But I think the learning that skill, and part of it's like being humble enough to say, I'm not above it.
Yeah.
Has served me so well. It's also allowed me to pass that on to people, right?
Yeah.
So I remember and the craziest thing is, Casey, I went out, and you guys said, hey, he's there for another like 10 days.
Yeah.
And I was like, great. Let me get in the car. How many hours is it going to take to get there? Tell him we'll be there in 36 hours. And you guys were like, really? I'm like, yep. Like, dude, I'm trying to, because, or else I would have had to wait a whole cycle. I'm like, I'm not doing a year of feeling like this. Shadowed Sam for a day. And he was like, all right, like, how are you feeling? I'm like, cool, got it. We're good. He was like, yeah. I'm like, yep. Sold 2 a day. Every single, like literally next day, 2 spot, next day, 2 spot, two. And like first 30 days, sold like 50 deals. And I was like, dude, I just sold more personally than I got all these offices to sell. Like, obviously, it wasn't anything crazy if I picked it up in a day. Like, yes, I might pick up some things faster than others. I get that. But we also saw that experience with others where they're getting sales. Then it just became okay, this works.
Yep.
Are you willing to pay the piper now? Right. Yeah. And that was the question that I had
Which again is hard.
Yeah.
Like I think about my experience and you're like just breaking down kind of some of the principles that like I'm observing and I'm seeing these parallels in my life, these life-changing parallels. Like when I came to Vivint and even in the industry, somehow I had the wisdom to say, I'm going to go find the person that's the best in the world or the best person that I can get access to.
In the
I'm
company,
and I'm going to interview them. And I still remember like my buddy's dad had sold a company for, $25 or $30 million. And this was 20 plus years ago. And I messaged my friend and said, hey, can I interview your dad? And that was my first lesson on like what it's like to be an entrepreneur and sell a company. And then I go to the first company and it's who's the top recruiter, who's the top salesperson, and interviewing them and just taking notes. When I came to Vivint, it was who are the top 5 managers?
Yeah.
Who are the top? And that even like in my current job, it's who is the best investors that you can go get access to. And sitting down and interviewing them and taking notes and really trying to just get an insight onto success leaves clues. And people are happy to share their roadmap and very few people ask. And I just think my life has always been changed because of this burning desire, this hunger to be successful. And then like going on that journey of asking. And I can just see this for you, like whether it was Cutco or whether it was going into Vivint and even post then. We were talking about this just barely. One of the guys who you just hired in your company, you were paying him as a consultant.
Yep.
Literally paying him 10 grand a month as a consultant for that exact same reason. You're saying you've got this deep industry expertise, and I'd gladly invest 120 grand for those nuggets, that wisdom.
And it goes back to something I said earlier, is for whatever reason, that concept of lifetime value makes the spend so easy.
Yeah.
Like I was just, somebody asked me, how much do you think you've invested in coaching and so on and so forth? And I was like, I've never tracked it, but I looked at it and the number's over $500,000,
Yeah.
like 600-700 grand at this point. And I'm not saying that has to be the number for everyone, but I'm saying it should probably be a percentage.
But have you ever looked back and resented those dollars?
I have never, because part of it is my philosophy is they can give me the knowledge, but it's up to me to force the return on that knowledge.
Have you ever made less from investing in yourself?
I don't think, not even, again, like lifetime value, it's impossible, right?
Yeah.
Like so let's talk about compounded lifetime value.
Yeah.
Let's say I make 1% more money in 1 year, right? So instead of 200 grand, I make an extra 2 grand, and that cost me 10 grand in coaching. And I invest that 2 grand. What's that going to be in 40 years from now? Like lifetime value, it's just so hard to not get a return on.
Yeah, to calc it.
Right. Like so many people are like, I want this return this year. And I'm like, dude, it's just like investing, right? You do enough of these deals and you're like, lifetime value is going to be
100%.
insane, let alone the compounding that happens if this knowledge compared with this knowledge.
The one that people miss is that the bigger opportunity is your human life value.
Yeah.
That one's the one that it's the same, simple feedback that your dad gave you, which is like, you can work really hard with your back.
Right.
Or you can work really hard with your mind.
Yep.
And he wasn't saying, hey, go study something that doesn't have like material impact on the physical world. He was saying, go learn how to, be productive. Go learn how to create value.
Right.
So talk to me about what you're doing today.
We have a solar company, a roofing company, and a tech company. And it's, it started in 2019 as a sales company. Got forced to start it because at a company I was at, they found out, I think the guy was embezzling money or something. A bunch of the guys didn't get paid. I didn't get paid. I just kept saying, hey, don't worry. Because I had investments. I was like, hey, don't worry about paying me. Let's pay the guys. Look around and you run the math and you're like, man, that's like 400, 500 grand.
Wow.
So that wasn't fun. And then, frankly, legal was like, hey, you have a stronger case if you don't go do your own thing. But I just had guys that were looking at me saying, hey, like, what do we do? Like, dude, you've got this, nest egg, you've got this cash flow, but we don't. And I just decided the risk was greater than the feeling I would have for the rest of my life. I left people out to dry.
Yeah.
So
you started it kind of by default or out of necessity. It wasn't something you were seeking to like go get a business plan and start a solar company.
Never. Frankly, if I was treated well wherever I was like, this is great. Like life, because you can still take chips off the table and invest. I heard somewhere that your best chance of success is being the number 2 through number 5 guy, not the number 1 guy, because then you don't have to take the risk and all that stuff. I would have been happy to be the 2 through 5 guy.
Yeah.
But we did that. Had a sales org. And similar story, installer was taking 7 months to install at one point. They owed us 740 grand. Won a judgment against them for 570. And then they filed bankruptcy the next week.
Wow.
And you're like, and this whole time on both those instances, my wife now, Nicole, she laughs because she's like, dude, you've been in the solar game for 2 years. You've crushed it, like for results wise, and you're negative 1.1 to show for it. Because I, not only am I zero, I'm negative 1.1 because with all the guys, like bro, my heart just hurt for them. So every single time one of those things happened, I dipped into my personal accounts to make the guys whole.
Wow.
Make the guys whole always. Because I was like, I don't know where it's going to go or it's not going to go, but I have extreme confidence in my ability to create
Yeah.
value and money. I just don't want anyone to ever be able to say like, because I realized that part of that was they trusted me, right? So they said, I'm going to work here because of you. Or they said, I really believe in the sales org. And it's very easy, I think, as leaders, sometimes when things go wrong,
Yeah.
to say, I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
And maybe this is harsh. But I think as a leader, it's your job to see things coming. So
how do you go from that to where your company's at today? Because it's a different universe, and even like the thoughtfulness,
yeah,
and like the mitigation of risk,
right,
and even just the deliberateness in the process. Very low liabilities, very low overhead, tremendous amount of outsourcing.
yeah,
You know what I mean? And so it's a very asset light business.
yeah.
Profit heavy, but asset light, not big margin, but
But
solid
safe margin.
Yeah. I think
you get burned and you see enough around you.
Yeah.
Where you're like, I don't want to have other people ever have that feeling that I did.
Yeah.
They may not be in a position to make their people whole. And that just, knowing me, that would just weigh on me.
Yeah.
My entire life. And I don't want that weight. But we got going as an installer in the Northeast. COVID in the Northeast was a little bit different than COVID in Texas for how seriously they took it.
Yeah.
So I remember COVID happens and I have distro and stuff like, hey, how are you guys doing? Like, are you impacted by COVID? I'm like, dude, life is better than it's ever been. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I get paid like clockwork by the financiers. Like, if I am facing the same obstacle everyone else is, I get excited. I'm like, game on. I think we can handle it better than they can. Yeah. We're going to eat their lunch, right? So that's been so interesting because the solar industry has gone through ups and downs.
Cycle. Yeah. Tremendous
right? And I've
amount
had
of cycling.
so many people say like, it's so tough. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, if everyone's going through the same thing, I'm betting on myself to come out better and I might scoop up other people's businesses.
Yeah.
But if it's like everyone else is getting paid and you individually are not getting paid, that's when it's like that was tough. All this stuff, like, this is a joke. These are small.
Yeah.
These aren't big monsters. So because of that attitude and because we went through those things, I think it really served us pretty well. So anything that comes up, people like, rates are up, solar industry is down 300%. I'm like, great. We had another growth year. They're like, oh, the ITC might go in. I'm like, great. Because I just feel more confident in our ability to make it through.
To navigate.
Yeah. Yep. Like, one of the larger financiers right now is behind payments on tons of people, including us. And somebody's asking like, what do you think happens? I'm like, either we get paid or nobody gets paid. And if nobody gets paid,
it's a bigger problem.
That's a bigger problem for everyone else. But like, if nobody gets paid, we're gonna 5x in 2 months.
Yeah, because everybody else be out of business.
They're gonna be out of business. We're not.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at. And then this quarter, at the end of this quarter, we'll be in 25 states.
That's so cool. Congratulations. It feels like, the last time we really had like a proper checkup was probably 8 months ago.
Yep.
And even 8 months ago, your business is so different.
So that comes from Todd.
Yeah.
That comes from where I learned at Vivint, right? You and Todd, you guys literally, you guys would talk all the time about like, if we are not putting the current version of our business out of business in every 2 to 3 year cycle, somebody else will do it for us.
Yep.
Like, that concept has stuck with me. And there's so many little
innovation.
And the innovate or die culture, right? And it may not be with tech, but it's like, are you re-innovating who the company is?
Yep.
And do you look back every 2 years and say, man, this feels like a different company?
Yeah.
That was one of the biggest lessons I took away from Vivint, right? And again, lifetime value, even if I made $0, applying that. So it's been a lot of little things that have come together for me.
Yeah.
And having like owning that concept of everything that happens, choosing to have the attitude of like, life is happening for me. It doesn't feel like it when you're getting your teeth kicked in. It's not easy to believe that.
No, that's a learned skill set. But when you really look at it, if you can have that frame of view, or if you can have that philosophy or that mindset that life is happening for me, it's not happening to me, and that even the problems or the pain, that these are gifts, and that there's good in this, and that this is going to be for my good. It's just a productive mindset. And you find it. You find the good if you're looking for it.
And Casey, it's a little bit easier to have that mindset where when you are having good years, and I tell my guys this all the time, when you're having good years, invest as much money as you can into that yield. Because if you're like, hey, worst case scenario, everything goes to crap, I'm still okay.
Yeah.
It just allows you to have a way different, like, you know, that concept of it's hard to work. It's hard to have a scarcity and abundance mindset at the same time.
Yeah.
And if I hadn't done that along the way,
It allows you to stay
worst case, I'm like, dude, worst case. And this is something I got from my dad, where he was like, in the US, he just has this belief, and I love it. He's like, in the US, if you don't do anything, you get taken care of. And if you crush it, you get taken care of. The people in the middle get hosed, right? He's like, dude, people that don't go for like, hey, I'm going to go out and whether it's sales or commission, really going to make an impact, they make out okay. And then the bottom end gets taken care of. And again, coming from Pakistan, he's sitting there saying, what's the worst that happens if you shoot your shot? Like you end up on this, like you're in the US.
Yeah.
You're not in Pakistan. So it's like you have a floor, right? He's like, you take your shot, everything goes to crap. The worst case is you'll still get government assistance until you end up back on your feet. So why would you just do this middle one? It doesn't make sense.
Do you think that's like an immigrant talking? Do you think that's like somebody that's coming? Because I think about my friends, you know, that grew up in the States, and I don't think that they have that same gratitude / same perspective on just how special the U.S. is. Like,
yeah, and I think part of it. So my dad was an entrepreneur in Pakistan. He had like a little, a book business. If you go to third world countries, you'll see, just people just starting their own businesses because of unemployment. So he'd done that, and and I remember he used to tell a story. My grandpa had like a Coca-Cola bottling factory, right? And that was their thing, and he was doing well. And there was a fire, and the factory burned down. But like, there's no insurance. So you're on the street. So I think part of those things you experience is like, in the US, you go for this thing, it doesn't work out. You'll get the Section 8s. You'll get these things until you're back on your feet. Anyways,
there's just safety nets. Yeah. That like, you're not flying without a net.
Exactly.
Like you do in some of these other places.
But his thing was like, hey, like, and he does not, there's people that end up in that like, hey, I'll just have government take care of me and all that stuff, right? And he like hates it. Like he's anything in his life to make sure he didn't fall into that. Partially because he was like, it's not about like the easy life right now, but what are they teaching their kids?
Yeah, but he's always taken the hard road. Like he's always worked the extra hours. And like even so now, like talk to me about your dad. What does he do? I know he bought some
we have
gas stations,
businesses. I mean, life is good.
He's kind of built like a little empire, hasn't he?
Absolutely. He's got multiple gas stations. He's got the good life. Jokingly, I was FaceTiming my mom earlier, and I was like, when does dad, like, where's dad, right? And she's like, oh, like, today he went in earlier to work. And I was like, what time? She's like, 11, And I'm like,
how cool is that though? Like to go from like getting out of Pakistan to driving a taxi in Baltimore to like being a multimillionaire.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And like financially independent.
Yeah.
It truly is like the American dream. And when you talk about like leaving a legacy for your kids and grandkids and just, I don't know, I love these like truly American stories.
Yeah.
Because they
inspire.
They light me up. Like I think about my story and I'm like, this is an American story. This is changing your station in life. This is saying I'm at this station and with, grit and hustle and some luck and ingenuity and hard work, I can change my station. And,
right. So it's like, Casey, when you see parents doing stuff like that, and then someone's like, aren't you nervous to leave Vector and go to Vivint? And I'm like, excuse me? Like, what are you talking about? Like,
you just never had that.
I'm like, I'll figure it out. Like, I don't have to learn a language. I'm not going to a different country. Like, I got it easy, Yeah. That's easy.
So talk to me about what's 3.0. You've been 1.0, you've been 2.0.
Yeah, I think
because you're how old now?
36.
Which is so insane. Like for you to have built what you built and had the success that you've had.
Yeah.
Like I just admire it. Like we've known each other for what? Probably a decade?
Yeah, a little over a decade.
You've been this way since the day I met you. Like you've had this drive and this passion and this consistency and even respect. You've always been like, out of any of those guys that came over, you were always so respectful to me. Like just always, and I've always like, that's been a data point that I've taken where it's like, anytime you call, I'm always answering your call. If you text, I'm always answering your text, because there's some courtesy and consideration and even just like kindness that you've always brought to the table.
Yeah, I think part of it's upbringing, right? Like I've talked to people where they're like, "Oh, like you've done so much," and I'm like, "Yes, but there's some luck involved." Like
Yeah.
if I didn't have the parents that I had, where am I? I don't know. If I didn't have the nurse that circled the newspaper, I don't know. Maybe I'm a doctor somewhere with a lot
Yeah.
of debt right now. I don't know.
Yep.
If I don't have the conversation with a Vivint, if I don't meet Casey, if I don't meet David, who's our partner now, like if I don't meet my wife, right?
Yeah.
Like where am I right now and all the craziness? Like there's a lot of people where they would have heard an earful, and mine is just like, hey, that's rough, but I also know who you are when you're not. If you're just not doing these things that you want to do, like I don't enjoy the version of human you are. So like go for it.
She wants you to grow. She just knows that's where you're happy. Is when
Yeah.
you're going for it.
Yeah. And she was the one where she's like, and she was doing well for herself. She was the CEO of a medical software company and had some equity. And she was just jokingly, she was like, if it all doesn't work out, I'm happy to be your sugar mama. And I'm like, dude, like that's support, She's
That's
like, you could
crazy.
be like, she's like, we're not like, I got you, like go for it.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of little pieces. What I have tried to do a really good job of is making sure I'm not letting those pieces go to waste around me. And I see too much waste. I heard Jeff Hoffman talk once. He was the CEO of Priceline. I'll send you I recorded his talk. It was way back when. And one of the things he talked about, he's done so much. Like Derek Jeter's calling him for his retirement speech and crazy. Like he's consulting other countries now on their economic policy, right? So super awesome guy. He invented the kiosk that we all go scan whatever in, right? When we check in at the airport. And there's a couple of things that stuck with me from his message, like really stuck with me. One was the concept of, he's like, you're going to come across people in your life and ideas in your life where you're like, I have no idea where this is going to come back to me, where this is going to connect with another dot, but I can just tell there's something there.
Yeah.
He's like, what I did with those ideas is I put them on a sticky note and I just popped them on a wall. And he's like, you do those enough, and then you just look at your wall, and all of a sudden these crazy connections start happening. You're like, well, wait a second. That guy with this idea, with this, and it just explodes. So I really took that to heart with relationships, of like, they're just people. It's like, I have no idea how, but it's just, I feel like there's something that might be there. So I think that sticky notes concept is life-changing for me. I have a note section. I don't do physical sticky notes, but I have a note section in my phone that's literally labeled sticky notes and has people and ideas. And I just throw people on there. I like see people like you are on there and Jeff. And then I'm very, very intentional of like, I don't know how anything's ever going to work out, but like every time I catch myself feeling grateful for something somebody said to me, I'm going to send him a little video. I'm going to send him a little note.
Yeah.
And it's not from a position of like, there's something that'll come out of it.
I've been the recipient of a number of those over the years, and they're always, nothing is generic.
Right.
It's always very sincere and very specific.
Right. And it's coming from, a place of, I'm genuinely grateful. And I, to my core, believe that my life would have been different without that one conversation with somebody or without this blank. Like my wife feels this way too. You have no idea how many times we're just sitting around like a kitchen table and Nicole will just look at my parents and she'll just start like tearing up. And my dad's like, what's going on? Are you okay? And she's like, I am just so grateful that you took the step to go from Pakistan to here. Because without that, this table is not happening right now. So I think both of us have always really genuinely felt that. And I think too many people feel it, but they don't take the time to express it, and I think there's just something about gratitude. I don't know what the math of it is.
It's just beautiful. Yeah. You live in abundance when you express it and it grows on itself.
It also helps you get through the tough times. Like sometimes when I'm having the crappiest day ever, I'm like, I'm sending out gratitude messages.
Yep.
Puts me in a different state.
Yep. Talk to me about faith.
Yeah.
Grew up Islam,
Yep.
the predominant faith. Your wife, Christian?
My wife was LDS. She
LDS.
converted.
Yep.
At some point. Yeah, I think my mom's probably gonna smack me if she hears this podcast, but like I'm religious. But I think we decided that we want to take the good from the religion that we really believe in. Because I think I also went through this phase in my life where I questioned the 99% or the 90% because I didn't agree with the 5%.
Yeah.
Right. And there's still some things like that, and I'm like, I don't believe that. The God I would worship wouldn't say that, for lack of a better word, right? Whatever it is, right? And I think, I went through that phase and I just came to a conclusion. And part of it was just conversation with, my wife, where I was like, there's a real place for faith and a second set of guiding principles, especially when we're kids, right? And we said the way we're going to do it is we're going to go through the things that we value, and then we're like, man, we believe this to our core. Like giving back, we believe to our core.
Yeah.
Being, nice, giving. One of the things we do at Empower Solar Company is we pay for eyesight restoration surgery for every system installed, right? So it's over 6 figures donated to Himalayan Cataract Project.
Wow.
But and it's funny, I was sitting there, I'm like, what number do I have to donate for me to be able to be like, man, 100,000 lives changed? What is that? And I'll just do random math sometimes, right? And Nicole peeks over, she's like, what's that number for? Because she sees me. I'm like, this is how much we have to donate for us to be able to say 100,000 people have eyesight in this world.
Yeah.
That didn't have it before.
Yeah.
So I think some of those things just came, with the upbringing, with faith. I think faith is important. And more importantly, I think if anyone out there is struggling with faith like I did, the only thing I would say to them is maybe just go through it and say, what are the things I believe in? Because they'll serve us more, right? If I'm just objective driven and I want a peaceful life, I want X, Y, and Z, life is better when you're just like.
But how would you summarize it? How would you say, like, these are the core beliefs? Like, this is what drives us. Or, like, this is where me and my wife settled. This is what we came up with.
We're still going through it.
Yeah.
Because ours is 2.5 and he can't really understand much, like he can understand, but, he understands chocolate and manipulating mom and dad to get what he wants. But I think part of it is doing it as a family exercise and us deciding these are the core values.
Yeah.
Right?
Like,
and
this is just like, this is what we're about. Like, this is our religion. This is.
This is our version of our religion, our faith, So, a really core principle for us is how we treat people, and our actions far supersede the things you have to do in religion, right? Like whether it's to us, this is just us, to us, going to church on Sunday, or if you had to pick one of the other, I'd realize the right answer is both, I'm sure, or using that time to have a big impact on somebody's life. What's worth more? Like if I had to pick one, we want to lead with the latter of impact, of give back, of all those, versus the person just checking a box.
Yeah.
Like, I just feel like some people have like a checklist.
Yeah.
Like if I check these boxes, then I get to go to heaven. And I'm like, I think we're missing something here.
Yeah, no, I think there's like beauty in saying like, I'm going to lead with my heart.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I'm going to live an authentic life and I'm going to lead with my heart and I'm going to lead with love.
Yeah.
And I think
ultimately,
I'm
going to lead with impact, right?
Yeah.
Like as crazy as it sounds, I heard you say something and it totally resonated. I sent it to Nicole because I was like, this hits, and you said, I feel like impacting people is my church. That's crazy as it sounds. Like, and I feel that to my core. Like I feel like donating, like that's my faith. I feel like when I'm sitting with an 18-year-old and they're just getting racked, as many do 18 to 22,
pour in your heart.
Yeah. With like clarity in my heart of like wanting what's best for them, like that stuff's important.
Yeah, so special. Well, brother, I appreciate you coming and spending some time with me. I'm always cheering for your wins, and it just, if I like know anything about you, you have this I will persist until I succeed ethos, that it's just it never surprises me when you land on top. because you just keep going. You know what I mean? You just keep working through the no's and you keep working through the challenges with a really great attitude. And it just like good things happen to people that will never quit. And you just kind of have been one of those people, and I really respect it.
I appreciate that so much. I think one of my principles that served me so well goes off as a reminder on my phone every day is that everything that I do is going to be a lot harder than I expect, but not harder than what I can figure out. And I think that's really stuck with me, where when I am getting my teeth kicked in, I'm like, oh yeah, like of course it was going to be a lot harder than I expected, but if I just stick through it, not harder than I can figure out. So I think that served me big time. I wish I figured that out even earlier in life, but
no, thanks, brother. Thanks for coming on.
Appreciate you, Casey.